Hey guys, welcome to day one. So today we're going to talk about a few things that are on your day one sheet. So when I first got introduced to intestinal health, when you listen to the other video, you might have heard me say, what was that? I really didn't know what intestinal health was necessarily, aside from thinking about, my bowel movements or my intestines. I didn't even really honestly know what all my intestines did. Now I know really well what all they do. So I want to pass that on to you. When you hear the term gut, it's very difficult to associate all of what the gut is. And so I want to make that really clear. So your gut health or your intestinal health is really important, but it's not just this section, right? It's not the fat that lays in front of our intestines or the muscle or whatever it is that you're dealing with. It is so much more. It's several other organs. So you have your stomach, that's where it starts. And we'll talk more about the importance of that being balanced. But then you have your gallbladder, you have your liver, you have your pancreas, you have your small intestines, your large intestines, you have your bladder and your kidneys. I got everything. So my memory, fails me when I am on the spot. So sometimes I have to keep my notes handy. So that's what all is involved in your intestinal tract, and that's what we're going to talk about in this next week. Keeping those things healthy and why it's important to have them healthy and why they become unhealthy. And one of the very first things that happens that draws them to a state of being unhealthy is something called dysbiosis. Dysbiosis, in a really short term, just means an imbalance of gut flora. So what that means is you have, if you don't know what flora are like live enzymes that live inside of our intestinal tract that help keep the food that we eat moving in and out and help separate them so that we can utilize the different proteins and things from them to bring nutrition to the rest of our body. So when you will always have, or you should always have, good flora, and you should have bad flora. The good flora helps keep things clean. It helps to break down the food. It helps of food absorption or nutrient absorption and things like that. Sorry if I keep rolling my eyes. Anyway. So you have bad gut flora, and they serve a purpose too when they're in small doses. And what happens with dysbiosis a lot of times is, really simply put, they just get out of balance. If the bad gut flora starts to overgrow because you've created an environment that is good for them, then they will kind of overpower the good gut flora. They'll just start to kill them off. And so what you want to do, obviously, is have a good balance, just like anything in life, right? It's kind of funny how that is always that way. So when you're moving forward and you're thinking about, well, okay, she's mentioned this term that I don't know what it is, and I don't really know if I have an imbalance. I mean, I take probiotics, so I'm probably fine, right? Well, here's some symptoms to help you figure out if it's something you're struggling with. So understand that signs of dysbiosis are going to be very similar to a lot of other signs, just like you'll figure out as we keep going on. Reoccurrent upper GI infections, chronic diarrhea, inflammation, inflammatory bowel diseases, inflammation also, but things like thinking of cramps, diarrhea, mucus in your stool, chronic constipation, decreased brain function, think brain fog, like there's people who can never really think very well, clearly something I'm still struggling with a little bit. Gas and bloating, abdominal discomfort. You know how you'll eat and then you have gas, like more so than well, maybe you've considered it normal. I know I considered it normal before I started all of this. Or you'll get cramps after you eat and, you just take a pill and you make it better, right? Well, we're really not supposed to have those. That's not normal. We're not supposed to have gas that has these awful smells attached to it. It is normal to have gas all the time, but you really aren't supposed to hear it or smell it. And you're really not supposed to experience cramps. Like, that's not something that we're supposed to have. It has become the norm. Kind of like I mentioned in the first video. A lot of this stuff has become the norm, but it shouldn't be. Mark that. It shouldn't be. Once I realized that, it really struck a chord in me when I first learned it. All right, so depression or anxiety a lot of times will come from intestinal imbalance. And the reason for that is because 85%, and that's a really safe estimate, they're proving it to actually be higher in some cases. 85% of some researchers are proving it, is what I should say. 85% safe estimate of the chemicals that our brain needs to function, like serotonin, dopamine, that sort of thing, they're all created in our gut. So if your gut isn't working properly, like your intestinal tract and all those different areas like we talked about, if it's not working right, then your brain can't function correctly. Let that sink in. If your intestinal tract isn't working right, then your brain can't function correctly. So depression really isn't always circumstance. Sometimes it's just metaphysical. Sometimes you're just not eating the right foods, and it's not because, you know, this food has this higher level of this nutrient. Well, if your body can't absorb those nutrients, if things are off in there, then you're not going to be getting those nutrients. It wouldn't matter how much of that food you ate. It's more about eating the foods that help your insides to function well. I just want to bring that up because I'm going to have to go into that a lot. So you might as well start thinking about it. All right. So fatigue, low energy. And that's not just like, I didn't sleep real well last night, so I'm a little tired today. It's like always tired, no matter how much coffee you drink, no matter how much sleep you get. You just are always really tired and drawn down. That's what they're referred to. Vaginal, anal, or mucous membranes that are irritated and itchy. Think ears, nose, sometimes feet that are always very itchy. Those are all, well, feet aren't really a mucous membrane, but they are a strong detox point. So you can experience that there. People who are experiencing halitosis all the time, bad breath, no matter how healthy their teeth are, no matter how clean their mouth is, no matter how much they brush their teeth, that's halitosis. And that's what they're referring to here. Joint pain, muscle weakness. I cannot even tell you guys how much joint pain I had that I didn't even realize I had. I was so used to being uncomfortable that it didn't even dawn on me that I shouldn't feel that way. And once I stopped feeling that way, I felt like a new person. It kind of blew my mind. Okay, so skin irritations and rashes. How many people's kids have eczema? That's not normal, guys. It's not supposed to happen. We're not supposed to have constant rashes. We're going to talk more about that later. And reoccurrent vaginal infections. So we'll talk more about that later too once we get to Candida. All right. So one thing that you want to think about is understanding what the role of the gut is. So now we've had some ideas. Well, maybe this is something I'm dealing with. Why would I want to fix it? Why would that be so important to me? It is fixable, by the way, so that's really exciting. There's going to be a lot of gloom and doom in the next 2 videos, but it gets really exciting towards the end because we talk about how you can make it better. So, but why is it important? So you have your nervous system, which is in your spinal cord, right? And then when that's not functioning correctly, the rest of your body can't function very well. To give you kind of an example of that, because I think it's important for everybody to know, when your spine has a subluxation, like when it's laying on a nerve, then the communication between, because every nerve goes to an organ throughout your spine. That's why the spine's there, is to protect that nerve, all those nerves, so that your organs can be protected and that your brain and your organs can all communicate. So when you have on your spine, when you have a vertebrae that's leaning on one of the nerves, then that particular organ isn't communicating well with your brain. I was given a really good example of this a long time ago, so I'll share it with you. Whenever let's just give an example. Let's say your heart is telling your body, we have cellular damage all throughout every day. That's just normal. We come in contact with lots of things that cause damage. But when we sleep at night, it actually can heal. The body can reproduce those cells and bring healing to those parts of our bodies because our bodies can heal themselves. So let's just pretend that your heart needed 100,000 cells to repair the damage that it had that day. And so it sent a message to your brain and said, I need 100,000 cells. And so your brain, because of the subluxation, that little pinch or that little leaning on the nerve, your brain got the message, I need 50,000 cells. And so your brain's like, okay, let's send 50,000 cells. That's half of what we need, right? Well, it goes further than that. Your heart might only actually get 20,000. And so it needed 100,000. It's only getting 20,000. And you can see how over time that's going to cause problems. And so your nervous system is extremely important. All right. So go see a chiropractor. Get adjusted. Have a well-adjusted spine. That's not the point of this video, but it is important. Anyway, so a lot of people get tons of healing when they start seeing a chiropractor. Here's why, and I'm one of those examples, that I didn't get complete healing. There's a piece of this, and a lot of chiropractors will actually spend time talking to you about it, because most chiropractors, it's very important to them that you you know, attack this from all angles, not just getting your spine fixed. But if your intestinal tract isn't functional, because that's your second nervous system, it's equally important to your spine, okay? So if you can keep your spine functioning properly, but your intestinal tract isn't functioning properly, then you still can't have full body health. So you got to work on both of them. And chiropractors will tell you that. They'll tell you how important it is to eat well and this sort of thing. And I've had some chiropractors tell me, because that's a chiropractor who told me to start healing my gut. And so you'll find the one that works for you, and will help you through that. So your intestinal tract is your second nervous system. And I wanted to tell you all that backstory because it's really important to understand how important that is. Nutrient absorption. So the wall of your intestinal tract is where a lot of that stuff happens. There's a lot of microphilia there that do a lot of the work of helping to break down your food, and your stomach plays a big role in that also. When the pH in your stomach isn't correct, your food can't get properly broken down. And so it's really important that you start healing all these different facets so that they can work together. Processes and eliminates toxins. That's very true. There's 4 organs within your intestinal tract, not just your intestines, that help to break down toxins and get them out of your system. So you can imagine if those areas aren't functioning properly, and you've got all these toxins coming in that we can't avoid. I mean, you can walk outside and you breathe toxins, and you use a toilet seat that's been cleaned with a bleach, and you're putting toxins on your skin and they absorb into your bloodstream. We just can't avoid it. There's toxins everywhere. So you want to make sure that you have a system that can actually get those things out. So if you've got a system that's not working properly and it can't get those things out, then obviously there's going to be a buildup and there will be a bit of a problem. So balance of the microbiome, obviously we've already talked about that. Protection from invaders, and that could be a cold, the flu. It could also be different parasites that we come in contact with. It could be a different type of microbiome that we're not ready to support. So lots of different kinds of invaders. Obviously, our intestinal tract deals with digesting our food, and it also deals with absorbing all of the nutrients from the food that we ingest. Vitamin production can actually happen within our intestinal tract. And it's also helps to keep our immune system going and keep our immune system functioning. And so you can see it's really important. Without that function there, a lot of stuff starts to break down and a lot of problems start to happen. So I put my paper down too soon. I have one last thing to talk about, and then we'll be done with this section for today. So everybody's looking at me and they're listening to this video and they're thinking, okay, fine. So maybe I might have dysbiosis. Maybe that's what, my daughter is having a problem with, and maybe my husband has it too. And okay, so maybe my whole family suffers from a little bit of this problem, right? Why? For me, that's a really important question. Some people are okay just knowing that it's a problem and moving forward. So if that's you, just turn this off. But if you don't understand why, then you can't stop it from happening, right? So that's kind of the important part here to understand. One of the very main ways that dysbiosis is happening is at birth. When you have a baby, and it's born vaginally, all of the microbiome that your body has currently is passed on to that child. So if your microbiome is imbalanced, you're passing on an imbalanced microbiome. So as soon as they're born, this is my daughter's situation, as soon as she was born, her microbiome was already imbalanced. She didn't have a microbiome until she came out of me, and she got what I gave her, and it was already imbalanced. Does that make sense? That's why a lot of kids are being born with these problems. Antibiotic use. So antibiotics have their place, I'm sure. There's lots of different ways throughout history that antibiotics have been useful. However, there are other things that you can do to try to use. So we'll talk more about that. Essential oils being a really big one. But overuse of antibiotics has, some people don't realize this, but when you take an antibiotic, you actually kill all of your microbiome, the good and the bad. And then you have to start over again, like a brand new baby. Except for you're starting over again in a world full of imbalance. And so it's very difficult to create a balance, right? And then there's also going to still be an imbalance inside of you in places that the antibiotic couldn't get to. So it's just altogether a really bad thing. You've got, you know, little Tommy who's had 4 or 5 ear infections and he's only 1, and he's been on 4 or 5 different antibiotics, and he was born through cesarean. So he was born with no microbiome. Let's just say he wasn't breastfed. Let's give an example. Worst case scenario, he was cesarean. He was fed formula, which is very, very, very high in sugar, and dairy, which is very difficult for our intestinal tracts to digest anyway. Or maybe soy, which could be even worse because it's full of GMOs. But anyway, whatever. I mean, we have to do what we have to do. Our children have to eat. And so this isn't a debate on breastfeeding. I'm just helping you to understand that there's more live organisms in breast milk than there is in formula. That's all I'm trying to point out. And then the ingredients that make up formula actually help to grow the bad microbiome. And so if that's your situation, which I was bottle fed, I was never breastfed, not for very long anyway. And so, you know, I grew up in that situation. That's where my gut was. I was born with a very low microbiome, very high in bad microbes. And then I was bottle fed formula. And then I grew up eating sugar. And so it was like, oh, I really didn't have a big chance there. And tons and tons and tons of antibiotics and other medications also. And so, that's, you know, kind of the series of effect that happens. And then you've got these kids who are being born and they're having all these illnesses. Like in their first week of life, they're sick. And people are like, why are all these babies sick? They shouldn't be sick. They're brand new. They've never even been out of this room. They're in the microbiome you've created unknowingly, right? So we got to start working on ourselves so that our future generations can get healthier. All right. Enough about that. Antibiotics, bad. Try to use something else. Try to find a different way. Talk to me. Ask questions. I will help you find different things if you're really interested in trying a different option. Steroids. Wow, lots of steroids. Think of all the kids with breathing problems. Lots of steroids being used. And they cause tons and tons of inflammation, among other things. But they really mess up the microbiome in a lot of the same ways that antibiotics do. Actually, this is one that was new to me, and I'm going to be real honest. I don't 120% completely understand all the ins and outs of how this changes it, but I know that it does. But taking the pill, taking birth control is actually affecting our microbiome as well as our hormone balance, causing a ton of problems. I'll try to make sure I list an article that talks more about it. So prescription drugs in general, because of them being synthetic and because of our bodies not being able to process them properly, one of the big things that it's doing is it can actually feed some of the unwanted pathogens inside of our intestinal tract, but it's also leaving a lot of toxins that we can't get rid of and causing tons of inflammation, which is in the long run is very bad. Your body can't function very well with a lot of inflammation. Over-the-counter drugs, same situation. It's synthetically made substances that are going into your system and your body can't process. So it's causing a lot of havoc. Stress, something none of us can avoid, right? So there's always, and I think I teach a whole class on this, so I'm not going to talk too much on it, but the key to getting stress under control is not to change your life. And you do need to change it in ways, but it isn't to change your life to where nothing bad happens to you that you have to deal with, but to change the way you look at the bad stuff, to change the way that you perceive what's coming at you. That will lower your stress. And essential oils are a huge part of that. Poor diet. We'll talk more and more about that, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on it right now. Infections. And we're getting so many more because our immune systems are so compromised. And every time we get those new pathogens introduced into our intestinal tract, they're just making it weaker and weaker. Different diseases that we're coming in contact with. And we'll talk more about where that can be a problem later. But there are certain diseases that we come in contact with that are actually making our intestinal tracts less healthy. A lot of times with the infection, the same thought process. We've already talked about bottle-fed pollution, lots more toxins. Radiation is actually a lot of the same ways as antibiotics. It's just killing off the microbiome completely. And then on top of that, causing a lot of toxic overload. Alcohol and caffeine actually play a really big role in how the intestinal system starts to get off track. I'm not going to lie, I drink coffee. Like I said before, I'm not perfect. None of us are. Toxic chemicals. Think of cleaning agents in your home. That's a good example. And then dental work, amalgams. Amalgams have a lot of heavy metals. Most of the older amalgams, the mercury amalgams, are heavy metals, and they cause so many neurological problems, and they cause so many different intestinal problems. Most people don't realize this, but what's happening in your, and I'll try to post an article on this too, but what's happening inside on the level of your gums and your teeth actually directly affects your organs. So having a healthy mouth that you're taking care of with proper tools, not like fluoride, but like non-fluoride toothpaste, and a lot of essential oils actually go hand in hand here. Oil pulling, things like that will help your organs to be healthier and help, of course, your mouth to be healthier. So wider smiles and all that stuff. So that's what we have for today. I just really wanted to help you guys understand what dysbiosis was. And to be very blunt, everybody's really dealing with it. Very few people aren't, simply because of the way that our generations have brought us up. I will say this really quickly about food. I keep referring to generations and how we are where we are because of what we know. I may not have said that, but I think it. So when we eat a certain way, we support a healthier whole body health, right? And so our food is supposed to have been one way that they ate like a long time ago. They ate this way a long time ago. And many generations have come since. And the communication from one generation to the next on how to eat the proper foods and how to prepare them has broken down. And so think of it like the game that you played in elementary school, telephone tree. And so one person would say something in one person's ear, and then the next one would hear it a little differently and say it differently, and so on until it was something completely different. That's kind of the way our food has gone down. So it started off, the way that we needed to eat. We were eating foods that our bodies needed to have. And then throughout the generations, that communication has been lost. And then industrialization has come into play, and all of our food is being made convenient. And convenient food is not healthy food. Convenient food for me is a frozen vegetable instead of a fresh one that I have to cut up. That's convenient. Something out of a box or a can should not be convenient. It should be considered unedible, truthfully. And I know that's kind of a bold statement for me to say to someone who doesn't have a lot of time, but I encourage you to think on that a little bit more. So when you're eating something out of a box, you're eating something that's been processed by so many different forms and had so many different unnatural ingredients added to it that your body just can't process it and it can't use it. And most of the time, it doesn't contain any real nutrition, and it doesn't contain anything else that your body actually needs to function. And so just think about that. I know of, in my family, 2 full generations that ate convenience food. Well, I guess 3, including my own. And I'm not 100% sure what happened before that, but I'm going to assume that's probably when it started to change. And so that's several generations of eating improperly. And it has affected each of their guts worse and worse and worse until I was born into this microbiome that was one of the later down the lines one. And so it's going to take some time to fix that. It's not something that happens overnight. This isn't like a weekly detox situation. It's going to take time, and it's going to take commitment and desire to want to change, but it's totally worth it. So stick with me. Please tune in tomorrow.